Well, if we're going to talk about issues of human consciousness, there's only one place to begin, and that's obviously with teleportation. So let's jump into that. There's no question that teleportation technology would be a quantum leap in terms of the capabilities available to humanity for a whole variety of things. You can imagine a world in which travel is instantaneous, as a world where there are no commutes. If you want to go on an international or maybe even interplanetary journey, it can be done instantaneously with no travel time. If you want to have your favorite Donner chicken on chips with chili sauce from a London fish and chips place, you can do that too instantaneously, regardless of whether you live in London or San Francisco. It could usher in a whole new world of new capabilities and capacities that we can barely even imagine at the moment. It also raises some concerns from my perspective. I think there's one kind of big fundamental problem that I wrestle with, and that is the problem of, is the person who ends up on the other end of the teleportation the same person as the one that entered into the teleportation chamber in the first place? And so I want to dig into that because I think that, in a weird way, answering that question, if it's possible to answer, really kind of cuts to the chase of how I imagine human consciousness existing and what the implications are of it. So let's dig into this a little bit. I think there are two ways that I can imagine teleportation or instantaneous travel. The first way that I think you can imagine teleportation happening from a technological perspective is you step into a giant, incredibly advanced scanner. It scans every molecule in your body, the state of every molecule, and then creates some data model that represents the exact configuration of you, sends it across the wire, and then on the far side, something reconstructs you and you have essentially teleported. We'll talk more about why I think that's potentially worrisome or problematic. Then the second, and this is the one that I've always been like, well, if teleportation was based on this, I'd be a lot more comfortable with it, is the idea of wormholes. I think it was the movie Event Horizon that had this kind of very cheeky scene where they were talking about the distance between 2 points A and B on a plane. And the question was, what's the shortest path between them? And the kind of Euclidean geometry answer to that is a straight line. But the answer in the movie was, if you fold the piece of paper in half so the 2 points are coincident, then there's no distance between the 2 points. And so that's kind of the concept that I go with for a wormhole. So each of these technologies could be imagined to be a way to create instantaneous travel between 2 points. So at this point, we've tumbled a little bit down the rabbit hole of teleportation without me really explaining where this is all coming from. So let me rewind just a little bit and try and explain. There's a video that came out about a week ago by a YouTube channel with a challenging to pronounce name, but here goes. I believe its name is Kyrgyzstan.
Kurz gesagt.
And it is a German channel that does videos about science and kind of the nature of the universe and things like that. And their videos are unbelievable. So I would highly recommend you go watch them. I will link to the specific video that I'm talking about down below. But that video was about Cyberpunk, the new video game. And it was one of those sponsored video, borderline native ad things like I talked about in my last video, but ignore that part. And it was specifically about the idea of uploading your brain and creating a digital copy of it. And it delved into a lot of the same concepts that I wrestle with when thinking about teleportation. The concept in this video was basically the same idea. You would have to scan/disassemble a brain in order to create a perfect simulation of every neuron and synapse and chemical receptor in the brain in order to create a perfect copy, essentially. And to the video's credit, they also explored the idea of a non-destructive scan, where you could upload your consciousness into some cloud-based data store service or something like that, and then that digital representation of you could for some time coexist with the physical manifestation of you. And that was one of the things that really got me thinking about the teleportation problem once again. One of the arguments that I have often used to raise concern about the scan and reproduce model, right? In the world of teleportation, if you disassemble the person in the scanning process and then reassemble them, there's still only one person. But you could imagine a more complex or more advanced scanner that could do that without being destructive towards the person. And then you would end up with two people that are at the moment identical and then diverge from that point. And that kind of proves, from my perspective, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that there is no continuity of consciousness that carries over during that teleportation. And that's really what I'm trying to get to the core of in this particular video. So one way to think about that is, in the destructive case, you know that the thing or person or entity that is created on the far side is the only one. So you can have a maybe question mark moment where you say, is this the same person? Whereas in the long distance cloning, you have proof beyond a shadow of a doubt that the entity that remained behind was the original version, and the new one is something else entirely. In my mind, when I think about these two things, the thing that makes the original person who got scanned the real one, quote unquote, is clearly something to do with continuity of experience, right? I was born, I grew up, I was me for that whole time, which means I'm still me, as opposed to this other entity that didn't exist before that is clearly like not me. This is also why the idea of wormhole travel is so appealing to me, because wormholes maintain that continuity of consciousness, right? It's like me stepping through a door, essentially. There's no moment of discontinuity like would happen in the destructive teleportation case, where I disappear from one place and then something with all of my memories appears on the far side. That leads me to memories, which I think are at the core of all of this. I think that one of the things that makes this a very complicated or difficult thing for me to wrap my mind around is that if we can perfectly duplicate a human being through this process, and we've done it right, at the moment of copying, the moment of teleportation, whatever you want to call it, the entity that arrives on the far side is going to have all of the memories of the person at the originating location. So that entity will be, without a doubt, perfectly convinced that they are the same person. They will remember my third grade play just like I remember my third grade play. And so as a result, the memories will, for that entity, create an illusion of continuousness. And beyond that even, continuousness of consciousness is a little problematic. And as I've thought about this more, I've started to realize that, because our notion of consciousness is already interrupted. It's interrupted when you sustain a head injury and go unconscious. It's interrupted when you get anesthesia. It's interrupted every night when you go to sleep. And so as a result, it becomes hard to make an argument for consistent consciousness even in the most mundane of lives. And beyond being difficult to make an argument for it, it is incredibly, if not impossible, to prove. Because every time I try to prove a consistent string of consciousness throughout my life, I base it on memories, right? Memories that I have formed that show that I was there at this time or that time or the other time. And if we're considering the teleportation case or the digital consciousness upload case, those memories being present are not proof of continuity, which makes this very complicated to kind of process. It's easy to see how memory could be viewed as the driver and creator of consistent experience, right? We often think back to gaps in our memory as moments of discontinuity in our experience. I don't remember that, or I repressed this memory, and as a result, there is a section of our continuous experience that is missing, that makes it discontinuous, but we as human beings seem rather comfortable with the idea of those discontinuities. If we play this all the way out to the most extreme version, we come to a point of asking ourselves about even just moment to moment, right? Ignoring discontinuities like sleep or getting knocked out or having anesthesia. What is the proof that we have that the Alden in one moment is the same Alden as the Alden that walked through the doorway, right? Is the Alden on the other side of the doorway in some way continuously connected to the first one through any mechanism other than his formation of memories over time? And to me, this kind of like starts to poke and prod at those there is only the now philosophy, right? The idea that the past and the future don't exist and there is really only this moment. All right, this is me rescuing you from a rambling and incoherent mess that was the next part of the video. I've had about 6 days to clarify some of my thoughts, and so I wanted to delve into what I think is honestly the most interesting part of this video. And that is, if we accept the philosophy of the now, that there is no future or past us, and that maybe consciousness isn't even consistent, the question that I immediately ask is, well, why do we feel that way? And there's kind of two sides to that coin. I think that when we think about our past self, there's a strong incentive for us to believe that our past self and our current self are the same person because that enables learning. So as a species, we learn by identifying with our past self and feeling the pain that our past self felt or feeling the joy that our past self felt, and those memories informing us in the way that we act in the present. Then when we think about the future, there's huge benefit to us investing in our future self. And that investment hinges on the idea that I, as a continuous being, benefit from my past self making investments in the future. And memory informs that, right? If I remember doing something that would benefit me now, and I'm benefiting in that moment from it, then that reaffirms this idea that we are a continuous being. So I think that's really interesting, but I'm also not sure if it is reality or if it's our mind playing tricks on us to get the best possible result, right? Has evolution trained our brains so that we believe that we are a consistent being, a consistent consciousness, because it benefits us and it causes us to survive, learn, and invest in the future, all of which are really important for us as a species. I thought that was really interesting, but now let's double back on the video. it's a bit of a conundrum. I don't honestly know. But one of the things that I want to do with this channel is ask questions and see what comes of it. So I'm very curious what some of you might think about this problem. I think there's certainly a spiritual angle, right? Maybe if there is a soul, then the soul is the thing that defines an individual, and teleportation that does not find a way to interact with and transport the soul is not real teleportation. Who knows? But in the meantime, I'm excited for the prospect of being able to teleport my favorite foods from halfway across the world. And since they don't have a soul, I don't have to worry about it. And also very curious to hear what all you think. So thank you so much for listening. And let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what I'm missing out on, what I should be reading, how to think about this problem differently. But in the meantime, have a wonderful rest of your day, and catch you in the next one. Bye. Not apotamus. Ponderous.